Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shanae Show. So this is the monthly Book Tag Tuesdays for October. Since I've never really done an official get to know me video for this channel, I figured I'd do a book specific one through a book tag. And when I was looking up book tags for this get to know the reader book tag, I was only finding specific genres get to know the fantasy reader book tag or get to know the sci-fi reader book tag. There weren't any real book tags that I was finding that were more general or broad-based, so I figured just create a little book tag. If there's another one out there that I didn't find, it is what it is. I really tried to look for more general, as I said, broad-based get to know the reader book tags that weren't tied to a specific genre. I really tried. It didn't happen, so I just created my own. Now, a couple of notes. These are mentioned down below in the description before the prompts, but I wanted to also mention them in the video. There are no set rules for this, but for any favorite prompts, like your favorite book or series as a child, that's a prompt. The second one, I think. You can do your top 3 favorites or your top 5, because I know how hard it is to narrow it down to a single favorite book or series. For this video specifically, really tried to narrow it down for myself to just kind of encompass who I am as a reader in this video at this point in time. And if you're anything like me, your memory from childhood is a little bit hit or miss, so any prompts that say as a child or as a preteen/teen, just do what you remember if you do remember. But again, if you're anything like me, it's a little bit hit or miss, so just do what you remember. And the last little note, these books do not have to be on your shelves. God, the universe, whoever's out there knows that I have gotten rid of quite a few of my childhood books. It doesn't have to be on your bookshelf. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. With all that said, let's get into this book tag. The first prompt is the first book you actively remember reading. For me, it's really a tie between The Hobbit and The Phantom Tollbooth. I really loved both as a child. I still really like both. I'm a really big Hobbit and Lord of the Rings fan. I still really love The Phantom Tollbooth. The Phantom Tollbooth is very much a children's book, but I think it's so applicable to people of all ages. I'm not saying that everyone has to read it because it is very much a hit or miss book. I can see why people might not like it, but I just absolutely loved it as a kid. The next prompt is your favorite book or series as a child. Again, that would probably have to be The Hobbit or The Phantom Tollbooth. There was also a book where it was Japanese children's fairy tales or children's Japanese fairy tales. I pulled it off of my bookshelf. To do a different answer than the first prompt, it's definitely this book, Japanese Children's Favorite Stories. I loved this as a kid. It was gifted to me by my grandmother. Okay, this is a side note, but something I really like about a lot of the older books, the hardcovers, when they have the dust jacket, the inside cover just matches. Why can't we do that again? Anyway, as I said, loved this as a kid. It's kind of beat up. You can tell how much I would pick it up and read it. And there's a green one too that I have to see if I can get from my dad. I loved this as a kid. The artwork is absolutely beautiful and I can't recommend it enough. The next prompt is your favorite book as a preteen/teen. For me, I'm gonna go with, there's 2. I'm actually not gonna mention one because that was a point in my life and I kind of don't want to focus on that right now. But one series that I can think of is The Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy by Lonnie Taylor. This one is definitely of its age. It's definitely YA of its time, and it wasn't that long ago. It was a decade ago, but it's very much of the 2010s, the early 2010s, very much of that time. But I really enjoyed it. Would I enjoy it as much if I read it today for the first time? No, but I really enjoyed it and it was my comfort series at the time. The next prompt is your favorite book or series now/as an adult. For me, I could go with Lord of the Rings again because recently I have been trying to read that on a yearly basis, but again, I'm trying not to repeat, so I'm gonna go with the Sex Crimson Cranes duology. I absolutely love this. It's another YA and it's such a comforting story and it has such a beautiful magic system and it just pulls at the right nostalgia chords for me while also being its own story without necessarily having to rely on the nostalgia chords. The next prompt is your favorite genre or genres as a child. For me, I would have to go with the childhood books. There was also like a lot of fantasy too that I was reading, like the Phantom Tollbooth is kind of like fantasy-esque sci-fi, Hobbit fantasy. There were a couple of books that were like mythology-esque, like the ology books from the Candlewick Press, so like Egyptology, oceanology? I think it was oceanology or something like that, and then mythology, dragonology, vampirology, wizardology. I really liked those books. So there was some fantasy, some historical fiction in there. The next prompt is your favorite genres as a preteen and teen. For me, there was a period of time when it was fantasy and young adult, and then at some point I switched to historical nonfiction and mythology, and that again was another time in my life. I feel like I could talk about that in like a Monthly Thursdays video, because I've made a similar video talking about like my experience with Black Butler. It was a very similar track of what I was doing with only reading history and nonfiction, and what I was doing with Black Butler and my participation in Black Butler. Anyway, that's not the point. So preteen and teen favorite genres, it definitely started out as like YA fantasy, and then transition took like a hard right into historical nonfiction and a little bit of mythology. The next prompt is your favorite genre or genres now as an adult. I still really enjoy history, nonfiction, and mythology. I also really enjoy historical fiction and mythology retellings. I am starting to get back into fantasy. I don't read as much young adult just because I find it a little bit harder to relate to the characters within young adults, but there are some young adults novels that I really enjoy, like I mentioned, the Six Crimson Cranes duology. I have also been reading some classics and more literary fiction. I don't read a whole lot of literary fiction, but I have read some classics. Classics have been hit or miss for me, but I would say on average, on the whole, I do enjoy most of the classics I've read. Well, not most. On average, I've enjoyed quite a few classics. The next prompt is genres you don't read as much. I talked about this, as I said, I don't gravitate at least as much to young adult. I don't read a lot of sci-fi. I've never read a lot of sci-fi. I don't really read a lot of literary fiction unless it's like a subgenre to historical fiction or fantasy, you know. I also don't read a lot of contemporary books. I should say like contemporary urban books where it's our world and our time. Again, I only read like contemporary fiction. Again, if it's a subgenre and usually tied to historical fiction where it's like a dual timeline. There was another genre that I was thinking, but I can't think of that genre right now. So the next prompt is genres you actively avoid. I try not to actively avoid any genres. When I'm walking through the bookstore, I was at the bookstore the other day, and when I'm like passing by the sci-fi section, like I don't actively look at the sci-fi section. It's almost like I'm actively not looking at it. Like I'll look at it because at my local Barnes & Noble, one of my local Barnes & Nobles, I'm in between like two. At the one I usually go to, there's sci-fi, and it's either manga or true crime and mystery thrillers and horror, and usually I'm looking through this section rather than the sci-fi section on this side. And I don't think I'm ever really going to get into sci-fi, hard sci-fi, unless it's like attached to something else like fantasy or historical fiction, just because I know I'm not really going to enjoy it as much. I do enjoy some sci-fi shows. I don't know, something about sci-fi and books, I don't think I can do it. The next prompt is favorite author or authors. For me, J.R.R. Tolkien, Natasha Lester, Elizabeth Lim. There are so many. These are in no order. I guess I'm going with like 4 or 5. A recent favorite has been Farah Roshon, who wrote the Brave Twisted Tale, which came out in April of 2024, and then she also wrote the Almost There Twisted Tale. There's a part of me that wants to read her other books, but that's a genre I actively avoid. Romance. Romance on its own is a genre that I do kind of actively avoid when it's just, especially when it's contemporary romance. I just actively avoid that genre. If it's historical romance, then I'll look at the synopsis and maybe try reading it through Libby or Kindle Unlimited, but I really actively don't pick those up. Sometimes I do. There have been some exceptions, like the Contemporary Mythos series by Carly Spade, who's also another favorite author, The God's Universe by Alyssa Thorne. So there are exceptions to me actively avoiding romance books, but 99% of the time I am actively avoiding it when it's on its own, when it's just romance, you know. Even if it's like fantasy romance or historical romance, then I still kind of am a little bit hesitant. I'll look at the synopsis, but I'm still a little bit hesitant. But back to favorite authors. Carly Spade is a recent favorite, Alessa Thorne, Tara Rochon, Elizabeth Lim, J.R. Tolkien. Those are some of my favorites. The next prompt is reading at the beach or reading at the pool. For me, it's kind of a bit of both. It really depends on my mood. My instinct is to say at the beach just for the whole vibes of it, but at the same time, there's that part of me that wants to avoid the sand, so it would be the pool. But again, overall, it really depends on my mood and what vibes I feel like at any given moment. The next prompt is reading by a fireplace or campfire. There's a part of me that does want to say campfire because you can have like a blanket and you get to be outside with a campfire and just the cool night air, the nature sounds. I'm very much a nature person. I love nature. Campfire, reading by a campfire is first instinct, but at the same time, reading by a fireplace is so cozy. So again, it really depends on the vibes I want to go for, but those are my instincts. The next prompt is best reading season. If we're just going based off of vibes, I would say fall or winter. Those also tend to be my better reading seasons, but purely based off, well, it is both fall or winter. So that's my answer. I was about to say if we're going less with vibes, but fall or winter is my answer in any scenario. And the last prompt is Bookstagram, BookTok, or BookTube. I use all three of these. I'm on Bookstagram and on BookTok, and I'm here on BookTube. I would have to say, like, it is easier to access like book recommendations and reviews on Bookstagram and BookTok because you can just pull up the app. I mean, you can do the same thing for YouTube. You can pull up the YouTube app. I don't know, there's just something, I think it's because I don't know what it is about Instagram and TikTok, but there's something about the ease of access about it. If we're doing, like, if I were to choose just one, I would probably say Bookstagram because I do tend to gravitate to Instagram the most out of all three of these. If I were to rank these, I would probably have it be Bookstagram on top and then BookTube at second place and BookTok at the bottom. I do really enjoy BookTok. It's just, there are so many times where there's drama, as I'm sure we all know. And then there's also so many people who just misrepresent BookTok. And there are people on the outside of the reading community and the BookTok community who misconstrue it because of the people who are misrepresenting it. So BookTok would kind of be at the bottom. I still like going to BookTok and referring to BookTok, but it is definitely kind of the bottom rung for me at this point, just because I feel, for me at least, it's a little bit too much mental energy, whereas Bookstagram and BookTube, it's not that much, and you still get, on the whole, a positive outcome from Bookstagram and BookTube. That is the end of this video. As for people I'm tagging, I'm going to tag anyone and everyone who wants to do this. You can leave your answers down below in a comment, do your own video, however you want to do this. Please do, I would love to see your answers. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.